This
I'm,
conference
go-
will now
I'm
be
going to start my
recorded.
session. So, a quick intro about myself. So, myself Suresh, and I have overall 8 years of IT experience. And from last 4 years, I have been developing solutions by using Azure Data Factory and other data engineering products in the Azure cloud. So, today we are going to discuss about Azure Data Factory. So, before we are going to jump into Azure Data Factory, right? Let's understand what is Azure, right? So, Azure is a Microsoft cloud environment. So, like Azure, there are some other market players are there in the industry. That is AWS, which is Amazon Cloud Environment, and we have GCP, which is a Google Cloud product, right? So, different cloud providers are offering, different services. So, if you talk about, AWS, they are mainly into infrastructure as a service, right? But if you talk about Azure, they are into infrastructure as a service, and at the same time, they are very rich in platform as a service. We call it as PaaS, that is platform as a service. So your ADF or any other data engineering products comes under platform as a service. Like ADF, Azure has many data engineering products are available, right? So among one of them, they are offering Azure Data Factory as one of the data engineering product. So well, let's understand what is Azure. So Azure is simply, it's a cloud ETL, right? So Microsoft definition says it's a data pipeline and orchestration tool. So what is data pipeline and orchestration tool? We will understand the details in our later concepts. First, let's talk about ETL only. Right, when you talk about ETL, there are already lot of tools are there in the market. Before we are going to proceed with the tools, you need to understand why we have to use ETL. So why industry should use this kind of ETL tools? That clarity first we will be getting. So let me demonstrate that with paint. So let's talk about any organization, guys. So in any organizations, there are different applications are running, right? So by using the applications, end users are capturing transactions. So by using the applications, end users are capturing transactions, right? So where exactly this data is getting stored? This data is getting stored into databases, right? So these databases are simply called, OLTP systems. So why they are called OLTP systems? Because they are capturing the end user transactions. So these are called OLTP systems, that is online transactional processing system, right? So nowadays, most of the OLTP systems are into RDBMS databases. So what are the popular RDBMS databases in the market? So RDBMS is relational database management system. So what are the popular RDBMS databases exists in the market? So right, so we have Oracle, SQL Server, and DB2. And if you talk about open source, there are some other products like MySQL and PostgreSQL. So like this, there are many uh, RDBMS databases exist in the market, right? So, but all these databases are good for OLTP, not for data warehouse. That means these are good only for transactional processing, not for your analytical purpose. That is OLAP, right? So but if you talk about typical organizations, right, the organizations would be using multiple applications. So definitely the biggest organizations would be using multiple applications. So why, so they have to use multiple applications, right? The point number one, the problem with these OLTP systems is, less capacity. So they are, they are only good up to, so all these popular OLTP databases are, the problem is less capacity. So all these popular databases like Oracle, SQL Server, or DB2, or whatever it is, right? So they are only good up to, handling 10 terabytes of data. For example, if you have a table with, 5 terabytes of data, and if you fire a SQL query, it might take, days time as well to give the results, right? So that is the main reason that, they are using multiple OLTP systems. The second thing is, right, the biggest organizations are running multiple applications, right? So for example, if you think about, biggest organization point of view, they would be, using hundreds of applications. Just imagine hundreds of applications are reading and writing the data into one database. What happens, right? So the database would crash, and it won't give, the results as expected. That's why, organizations are using multiple OLTP databases, right? So like this, they would use, multiple OLTP databases. So here again, right, so one organization might be using different kinds of OLTP databases. Like, the same organization might be using Oracle, and the same organization might be using DB2, same organization would be using SQL Server, like this, right? Why they have to use, different kinds of, databases, right? The same organization might use Oracle and SQL Server, which is a Microsoft product again, and DB2, and like this, right? So they might use PostgreSQL. So why they have to use, different kinds of, applications, right? That's because, there would be some applications might be compatible with Oracle, some applications might be compatible with SQL Server, and some applications might be compatible with other open source databases. And these databases are not free, guys. So this, some of this Oracle Enterprise Database, SQL Server, DB2, these are all, licensed softwares. So they need to pay the license as well. So they would have their own requirements in the organization. Some might use, open source like MySQL, PostgreSQL, like that. So by this, organization would have, different kinds of challenges. That's why, they would be using different OLTP databases. The problem with this OLTP database, you already know. So the problem is, it can handle only 10 terabytes of data. So the basically, it has the less capacity it can handle. They can't keep entire we can't keep entire our historical data into our OLTP databases. Let's say you have an organization with a history of 30 years, right? And if you want to keep all the 30 years of data into your databases, that is not possible. So how much you can keep? You can keep only recent data. So how you can define that recent data, right? That recent data you can define, by the help of, transactional frequency occurring on that particular system. So here, that is why, industry is compromising. It is compromising in such a way that they are maintaining only, 2 or 3 years of data, and remaining, so they would not keep into our OLTP systems. So that's why, if you have, some you would have already familiarity with the bank accounts, right? So if you want to see your bank statement, and if you want to see the recent bank statement like 1 year or 2 years ago, you can simply log into your bank account and then get, how whichever month you would like to see the statement, right? Whereas if you want to see the statement, beyond 2 years, right? So then you won't get, instantaneously when you are logging into the account. You need to request that statement, and that statement would be delivered to you, right? So from where they will get that statement, right? So our entire, historical data would be stored in the biggest data garden called data warehouse. This is where, all the entire historical data is being stored. We will store only the recent data into our OLTP databases, and all the historical data would be stored into data warehouse systems, guys. So let's try to understand, what is the traditional data warehouse, and later we will understand what are the modern data warehouses and what are the benefits we will be getting. So the problem with the OLTP databases is less capacity, right? And the solution for this is The solution for this is data warehouse system. There are some special database for data warehouse. So these special databases are also into RDBMS category. So let's understand what are the popular the data warehouses exist in the market, right? So this would be the solution till last 5 years, right? So the popular RDBMS data warehouse in the market is Teradata, Netezza, Vertica, like this, right? So there are these are the popular RDBMS databases exist in the market, and this is the solution till last 5 years. All the OLTP databases are using SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, like this, and all the warehouse systems are using Teradata, Netezza, and Vertica. And what is the problem with this great databases, guys? So the problem with this, this Teradata, Netezza, Vertica is, they can also handle only, some limited amount of data only. They cannot handle, unlimited data. So the limitation of handling the data by these warehouse systems is, 200 terabytes max. Of course, 200 terabytes is, biggest value volume for us. But, if you think about, biggest organization, so nowadays the data volume is increasing like anything. And the next problem for this is, right, so the point number one is, the problem with this is, volume of data. So max up to 200 terabytes. And point number two is, so these databases are into which category? RDBMS category. That means it can handle only structured data. So lot data nowadays is unstructured and logs. Only max 20 to 25% of data in our organizations are structured. So these are the problems we have in our data warehouse, the traditional data warehouse system. That's why to overcome this, so Hadoop has released one special file system called HDFS file system. So which is Hadoop distributed file system, right? So they came around in 2011 with one feature called unlimited data storage. By using Hadoop, you can get can get the feature of unlimited data storage. So with the inspiration of Hadoop in cloud, data lakes came into the existence, right? So and the same data lake in Azure is called Azure Data Lake. So and Azure Data Lake is offering you one thing. They are also offering unlimited data storage. And here the advantage of Azure Data Lake is you can store any kind of data. You can store structured data, you can store unstructured data, you can store video files, audio files, anything. And you don't need to understand the underlying architecture of Hadoop here. So this would be maintained by Microsoft, and you just need to work with Azure Data Lake only. You don't need to worry about what are the Hadoop, how to work with all those things, right? So they would be taking care. You just need to understand how you can use Azure Data Lake. Here you can store the unlimited data storage. Now so based on your data volume, you can use different kinds of systems, right? So if your data volume is going beyond 200 terabytes, then go with distributed systems like Data Lake, Azure Data Lake, or Azure Synapse, and like this you can use any kind of distributed systems. And you can use Hadoop, HDFS, right? You can use the if the data volume is going beyond 200 terabytes, then you can do you can go with this kind of database. But my question here is, whatever data warehouse you are using, it doesn't matter for end user, right? So end user transactions are being stored in OLTP systems. So how to bring this data into warehouse systems, right? So this would be your warehouse environment. So end users are performing, they're capturing their transaction by using online applications, and those transactions are being stored into our databases, right? Like Oracle, SQL Server, DB2. And how to bring these ones into your data lakes, for example, right? Let's say this is your data lake, right? Or so how to get this data from here to here? So by running special process called by running a special process called ETL. With the help of that, you can by running a special process called ETL. So by running that ETL process, you can get the data from your OLTP databases to warehouse systems, right? So this would be your warehouse. So let's say this is your Azure Data Lake. So here in Azure Data Lake, you can store any kind of data. It can be structured, unstructured, anything, right? And if you have only structured data, and if you want to store, right, you can use in Azure you have some other the RDBMS data warehouse, distributed databases data warehouse called Azure Synapse. If the data is structured, you can store into Synapse. If the data is unstructured, you can store into Azure Data Lake, right? So how you can bring this one, right? By using a special process called ETL. So what is ETL, guys? So ETL means extraction and transformation and loading. So what is extraction? Extraction means reading the data from source system, source database. And what is loading, right? So loading means writing the data into target system. So after reading and before loading, right, there is something called transformation. What is transformation? So what is the significance of using transformation, right? So let's understand the significance of using transformation with some example. So let's say I have an online application, and where so some of the users are signing up with that application. So while signing up, they are giving their first name, and they are giving last name, and they are giving date of birth, some location, something like this, right? And end of the day, I would like to get one kind of information like how many middle-aged people are joined, how many uh, elderly people are logged in, how many teenagers are logged into my application, right? So for that I would like to get one kind of report. But if you see here, so the input input for this one is we have only date of birth, right? So but target requirement here is age group, right? So it is not the same, right? So for that purpose, we need to perform this transformation here on this one. So how to perform the transformation? So if you have age, if you have date of birth, by using the current date, so I can calculate the age, right? By using current date, I can calculate the age. This is first level of transformation. So by using your current age, I can, by using date of birth, by using current date, by using your date of birth and current date, so I can get your age. And age has to be transformed into age group. I can categorize the age into a different age group, right? The second level of transformation here I will be performing is age to age group. So once all these transformations is done, then what I will do first, initially in this process, what we are doing, we are reading the data from source system, and then writing the, after that we are performing the transformations, like, by converting date of birth to age, and then, age to age group. And finally what we will do, we will write the data into our target system. We will write the data into target system. So this is the work style of, ETL. So this is the work style of ETL, right? So finally, right, so wherever you are storing the data, that doesn't matter for, the business users. What they wanted to know, they would like to get, the predications, or, they would like to get, some kind of summary about your business. For that purpose, what they will do, they would like to, we have already performed, some kind of transformation, right? And we will store the data into, we have stored the data into our target, which we target here, it could be, your data lake, or it could be, Synapse. So once you have, this target requirement, target data is stored, so the business user, wants to understand the summary and predications about his business. For that purpose, what he will do, he will connect to, this data warehousing systems. So to where he will connect from here, they will connect to, data warehouse systems, and then they will, understand, they will use some kind of visualization tools, and then by using those visualization tools, they will prepare some kinds of charts here, reports, right? So this is how, this entire picture is called business intelligence. So they will connect to your data warehouse systems, and then they will understand the business requirement, based on the business requirement, they would perform the visualizations here, right? So but as a, for your part, the mostly the work area for us is, this one, right? Which is, our ETL part. This is our work area. And before we are going to, understand about the ETL and ADF, so what we will do is, so we will so you will be, you need to know that, you are not going to designate it as a ETL developer, you will be designated as a data engineer. So we will talk about what are the different roles you will have as a data engineer, but let's talk about, the ETL part. So ETL means, you already know, right? So it means extracting, transformation, and loading the data into target system. So already, if you talk about ETL, there are a lot of tools in the market. So what are some of the famous ETL tools in the market is, like, right, Informatica, SSIS, which is a Microsoft product, and Ab Initio, Data Stage, which is IBM product, Talent, Alteryx. So like this, there are already many ETL tools are there. So among, so what is the, importance of again this special ETL tool called, ADF, right? So even though if you talk about Microsoft itself, they have their own ETL tool called SSIS. And what is the significance of, ADF when you compare to other tools, right? So if you talk about SSIS, that is a on-premises ETL tool. And if you talk about, ADF, that is cloud ETL tool. So what are the benefits, if you will get when you are using ADF when compared to, other ETL tools, right? So like so you for your organization, ETL process is required, right? And you have two tools, one is SSIS, another one is ADF, and you are choosing ADF, right? And what are the benefits you are going to get, by choosing the ADF? The first attractive point for anyone is, no infrastructure. So that's why, there is, since there is no need of handling the infrastructure, that's why cloud is getting, very popular these days, right? So so what is the process of, procuring an infrastructure, right? So let's say, I wanted to set up one SSIS or informatica server, right? So what is the process? So these are all on premises systems. So if you want to set up, this informatica or SSIS servers, you need to maintain data center for that. We cannot keep, our servers in our room, right? We cannot keep in our offices, so we need to maintain a data center for that. So so let's say you are decided to maintain a data center with some 100 servers, right? And what is the process, right? So first of all, you need to, purchase the hardware, right? And once you purchase the hardware, you need to have, hardware team to establish all these 100 servers. And once you establish the servers, then, the request goes to, so once you have, let's say you have established all the servers, and what is the next thing, right? You need to, install all the dependencies. First of all, before installing dependencies, you need to install all the, operating systems. So you need to install the operating system, and then, you need to keep all these 100 systems into one network, right? So for that, you need a networking team. So they will keep all these 100 servers into one network, and then after that, request goes to firewall team, and then after that, request goes to, so then networking team. So they will keep all these 100 systems into, one single network, and then the request goes to firewall team, and then it will go to security team. So this much process is there to, to engage your data center. So not only investment here, so if you keep the investment to materialize the product, it might take a month's time as well. So whereas if you talk about ADF, right, you don't need to worry about all these things. It will be taken care by your cloud provider. In our case, so Azure will handle all these things for us. This is, one of the first attractive point when you are using, Azure Data Factory. The second attractive point is, no maintenance. So for example, so we are using, right, so we are using all our systems, and whenever there is an upgrade to the operating systems, what you need to do, you need to perform that upgradation, and there will be some, maintenance time for that, right? And again, here you need to maintain those technical teams to upgrade the operating system. And whenever there is some security patches, they need to install those security patches. So there are a lot of maintenance activities out there. So all this maintenance also, taken care by Microsoft. We don't need to worry about the maintenance as well. That is another, the second attractive point when you are going with a cloud ETL. That's why, the demand is very big for this, right? And the third attractive point is, right, so the third attractive point here is, so whatever resources you are using, right, you will be paying only for those resources. For example, you are using, last month you are running a big job, and you have consumed a lot of compute resources, network resources, and processing resources, right? And then for that only you would be paying whatever resources you are using. Only for those resources you will be paying, and the resources which you are not using, you won't be paying. And let's say your work is done last month, you have done very heavy lift load, and you have performed that job, right? And this month you don't have that much work, and so last month your billing would be high, and this month you won't be paying anything. So that model is called pay as you go model. So whatever you are using, you would be paying for that. And the fourth attractive point in the Azure cloud is, so Azure cloud or data factory is, the scalability. So for example, right, so you have, so nowadays your data volume is getting bigger and bigger. And let's say, so last month you have only, the capacity of data is only some 10 terabytes. And suddenly in this month you are expecting the data of, size some 50 to 100 terabytes. So if you are using these on premises systems, you need to, install those softwares again. You need to purchase those systems and install and everything, right? So here that is, so again you need to follow the process from the first. the infrastructure you need to have, and you need to procure the hardware, and then again operating system, and again networking team. So a lot of process you need to follow if you want to use that one, but still it will take a lot of time, right? So but in case of Azure cloud, you can simply scale the resources according to your need. You don't need to wait for the resources to be installed and wait for the time, right? So there you will be saving a lot of time and money. And fifth attractive point here is the investment you don't need to put in the upfront. So whatever resources you are going to use, you need to pay only for those. And that fifth attracting point is security. Our cloud providers is providing the 100% security. So they would have a very big security team, and then they can maintain security better than us. So and if whenever your data is missing, right, your cloud provider they will be able to provide you the data. So that is called data redundancy as well. So if your data is missing, then they would be able to provide. So that point we will call is high availability. So you will have the data availability all the time. So these are so another important point are there. So the seventh point for using this Azure cloud is so if you are talking about these traditional ETL tools, you need to pay the software and license charges, right? So these softwares and license charges are more costlier than this infrastructure. They are not free cost. And again, these are not lifetime free of the license cost. They, you need to renew those license cost every 1 or 2 years. So but if you are using ADF, then you don't need to pay those kind of licenses as well. So there won't be any license cost. So that's why so you have a lot of advantages by using ADF. That's why it is gaining more and more popularity. And you can, by using ADF, you can perform all those operations like what you are performing by using the traditional ETL tools like SSIS or Informatica. And also you can have all these kind of benefits, right? And if you are using these traditional ETL tools, right, you would need to use somewhere coding is required if you are using these traditional ETL tools. Whereas if you are using ADF, there is no coding, and it's a code free ETL tool. You can perform your transformation by using graphical designer. So you can create your pipelines without writing any kind of code. If somewhere so you need some kind of customizations, for those customizations you can use Databricks or some other Synapse. So those environments, for that so other developers would be able to help you, and then you can orchestrate that code into your ADF. So to learn the ADF, the prerequisite is only SQL. So if you have the good understanding or of SQL, then you can easily learn SQL, ADF. And there won't be any kind of coding involvement here. So but if you want to become full stack data engineer, there are some other tools you need to learn, like so as I mentioned, so Azure is offering many data engineering products. So some of the data engineering product I will quickly list here, which is Azure SQL. This is our cloud OLTP system. And then Azure storage, and it has data lakes, Azure data lake storage, and Azure Synapse. And if you are using only structured data, then you can use Azure Synapse. And Azure Data Factory, already, this is our cloud ETL tool. And Azure Databricks, and Azure Cosmos DB, which is your NoSQL database in cloud. And Azure streaming for streaming data and all. So these are some of the full stack data engineering products available in the Azure. So let's talk about ADF only. So what is ADF, right? So far we understood ADF is a cloud ETL tool. So but ADF can offer you two things. It can perform two kinds of operations, two types of operations. It can work like a ETL, and it can work like a ELT. So ETL you already know. So what is ELT, right? ELT means extraction, then transformation and loading. So extraction means reading the data from source, and then transformations means writing the data in performing transformations on the data, and then loading the data into target. But your ADF can work in a ETL style or ELT style. So what it does is initially it will read the data, and then it will load the data into your target. Here the target could be, so initially whenever you have data here, right, by using ETL process, it will load the data into your data lake, right? And once the data is loaded into data lake, then so by using ADF you will load the data into data lake, and again by using ADF you will perform all the required transformations. And here you won't be using any kind of code. And then if the data is in structured way, then you can simply use Azure mapping data flows for performing the transformations, right? So by that, what it is giving is when to use what, right? You have ETL kind of style and ELT kind of style. If you are working with small volumes of data, then go for ETL. And if you are working with big volumes of data, the recommendation would be ELT. So because if you are working with big volumes of data, and if you're working on the ETL style, and sometimes you will have your source system timeout errors. So for to avoid those, and if you want to scale the resources, right? So if the data is in cloud, you can scale from both source and target side. Whereas if you're performing the ETL operations, your source would be sitting somewhere where we have no idea, right? So there you can't scale the resources. So but if you are once you have loaded the data into your target, if you want to perform the transformations very fastly, you can scale the resources, right? So that's why your ADF can perform two kinds of operations. One is the ETL kind of operations, and the another one is ELT kind of operations. It depends on so what kind of data we are handling. So based on that, we need to choose our the style of work style of ETL. So let's quickly see how we can perform this kind of operations by using ADF, right? So I will quickly open ADF Studio, and then so I will show you different kinds of components available in ADF. So before we are going, since we already talked about importance of cloud, and importance of this kind of um, the cloud ETLs, right? So we, since we have already talked about this importance of cloud detail, let's see what are the popular the other cloud data warehouse systems are there in the market, right? So previously we were using only Teradata, Netezza, Vertica, this kind of systems, right? With this cloud, so they have there are some special databases existed in the market, because here you don't need to worry about underlying architecture, underlying infrastructure and all. For that, the recently we started using Synapse and Amazon Redshift, and there is some other popular product called Snowflake database. So these are some of the modern cloud, cloud data warehousing systems are there. So why these are gaining very popularity is, right? So what you, by using the Synapse, you can process structured and unstructured data. But previously by using this kind of traditional data warehousing systems, you can process only relational data, and which is structured data. Here if you have a lot of unstructured data is there, you can store the data into our warehouse system. Here it could be, you can store the data into our data warehouse, and in data warehouse you can store structured, unstructured and semi structured, all kinds of data. So structured meaning you already know, right? So structured you would be structured, we will get something like the tables, CSV file, some other delimited text files. And whereas you can also store semi-structured data. Semi-structured meaning you can store JSON files, XML files, and some YAML files. So all these kinds of data you can store in your data lake, and unstructured files also you can store in your data lake. So unstructured would be your audio files, video files, and logs, some raw text files. So like this you can store all kinds of data, and once you store the data here by using this modern data warehouse systems, you can perform analytics on all kinds of data. So you can write here PySpark code, and you can write Python code on this, and you can format this data if the data is in structured sorry, if the data is in unstructured, and you can get the insights from data. So whereas if the data is in structure, you can simply write SQL code, and by using the SQL you can get the business insights, right? So this entire picture, this is called business intelligence. Hope you have got some good idea about the business intelligence here. And our work area would be mostly into ETL part, like extracting the data from source, unloading the data into target, and performing cleaning the data and performing all the required transformation, making the data into more meaningful way. Because raw data would not contain always business insights. So nobody is interested to see record by record level information. They are interested to see aggregate information. What is our the previous year sales and current year sales, and how my business is doing when compared to 10 years back and this year. So like this kind of analytics is required. So those things we will be able to perform by using ETL without writing any kind of code here. So how we can perform in Azure Data Factory by using this, right? It has different tools are there. ADF has different tools. By using those components, you can simply perform the code free transformations. I will quickly open ADF, and then you will understand how to perform those kind of transformations without writing any code. So by using only visual editor, and so with you need to put some very little logic over there, and by using that logic you can develop the your data pipelines. And not only developing is required, right? So you need to the automating those things, right? So for example, in our previous example we have seen, right? So I wanted to understand my online application, how many users are logging in every day, right? So I don't want to come and do every day the same activity. I would like to orchestrate that one, automate that process. So for that whenever the at the so some particular time I would like to run this process, and then I would like to email that report to my email. So then I can check how many users are logging in, and what kind of users are mostly interested in my application. So then if I want to attract some other age group, so what I need to do, right? So those kind of strategies I will think, and then I can implement, right? So for that purpose in ADF you have you can orchestrate very easily, you can orchestrate those kind, automate those kind of tasks here. So there is something called triggers. By using the triggers you can run your pipelines periodically. So the main components of ADF is, right, so it has something called data pipelines, and here you can construct the pipelines by using visual editor. So here pipelines means what we will be doing in the ADF. The main work is reading the data from source, right? So for that first of all if you want to read the data, you need to have some kind of accesses, right? So from the source, and once you have got that access, you can simply let's say we want to copy the data, you don't need to write any kind of code. Simply you need to use your copy activity, copy data activity, and then go to source here, configure this some of this data set. You will understand these terminologies, and what are the prerequisites to configure these data sets, all those things in our upcoming classes. So then where you want, once you have connected to source data set, and where exactly you would like to load the data into target. So here you can create a targets, like these are the supported, all the supported targets. And in Azure you can connect to almost all kinds of popular data sources exist in the market. It has more than 100 plus connectors. If you want to load the data into your data lake, you can do it. And if you want to load the data into Azure SQL, you can do it. If you want to load the data into some file system or your Synapse, anything you can do. We have all connectors for this. You don't need to write any kind of code here, right? So in a same way, you can get the data from multiple sources. You can get the data from on-premises system and the cloud system, like Amazon S3 bucket and all those, right? So there are a number of connectors are there. You can get the data from different kinds of sources. And here so the ADF has mainly 4 components, right? 4 or 5 components are there. One is pipelines, the another one is activities, so another thing is data sets, and then linked services, then integration runtimes. You will understand all these concepts in our upcoming classes. Integration runtimes and triggers. So all these all these are the building blocks of ADF. By using all these building blocks, you can perform you can automate this process, entire process, right? So that's all I have for this class. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm stopping my screen share.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, so may I know how much time it will take to learn this ADF?
So basically, I plan to teach ADF within 35 classes. That means it will take around 45 to 50 days.
Okay, and I think SQL is necessary, or we can skip for
If
this.
you have SQL basic understanding, that is SQL basic understanding is required. And so that is I would say it's kind of a mandatory thing. If you don't have knowledge at all in SQL, so you can still learn ADF, but later again you need to learn